Hello, dear students. Welcome back to Social Studies. We're going to continue to explore the origins of the Civil War of 1861-65. And we're going to continue thinking about, was the Civil War inevitable? That's the sort of overall key question that we'll come back to a little later the next few weeks. But more specifically, what I want to look at this week is what role did the Industrial Revolution play in the growth of slavery in the U.S. between 1800 and 1860. And the second focus question will be, what role did the Erie Canal in New York State play in the economic growth of the United States after 1825, and therefore also in the growth of the slave economy up until 1860? Okay, so these are the two questions we're going to look at. We're going to first address or look at the first question, the role of the Industrial Revolution, the growth of slavery. All right, let's turn to this slide. Now, I want to remind you, last week we looked at how a technological invention, the cotton gin, Eli Whitney's cotton gin, helped grow the cotton economy in the South by making it easier to clean cotton, and how that in turn then grew the slave economy in the South, right? So we actually, last week, we started looking at the connection between technology, the cotton gin, and the cotton economy, King Cotton, and then slavery. And so we're continuing to do so this week, but I want to look more broadly at the role of a huge technological change, which is known as the Industrial Revolution, had in the growth of slavery in the United States. So first, let me talk a little about what was the Industrial Revolution? Basically, the Industrial Revolution was the biggest technological revolution humanity ever experienced. A revolution, a technological revolution that continues to this day, okay? But it truly begins around 1780. And it begins actually not in the United States, it begins in England around 1780. What was this Industrial Revolution? Well, it is a technological revolution that involved the invention of machines that could make goods or products such as cotton shirts, textiles, but other products too, much more efficiently, okay? These products could be now made by machines on a huge scale, which made them cheaper and therefore increased the number of people who could afford them and grew the economy overall. Okay, so a technological revolution, and it's also a technological revolution which will benefit eventually from the discovery of machines that can derive energy from new sources of energy such as coal. Okay, so initially these machines that process the raw cotton grown in plantations and turn them into cotton shirts, cotton textiles, initially these machines in England after 1780 were driven by streams and moving water. But by the 1820s, steam-powered engines, which were powered by coal, were attached to these machines, making them even more efficient. Okay, so you have the invention of technologies, machines that make products very efficiently, and then you have the discovery of new sources of energy such as coal, right? So, this is, the core of the Industrial Revolution is that. Now, you might ask, what's the connection with cotton and with the slave economy that grows in the United States? I'll remind you, not unexpectedly after 1800. Well, the connection is that most of the early Industrial Revolution that happens between 1800 and 1860, most of it involves textiles or clothes. Okay, so that's where cotton and slaves come in. Cotton was the most important and profitable crop to be turned into textiles in English factories. Okay, so it was central to this Industrial Revolution. And in turn, the Industrial Revolution was so successful at churning out it, producing cheap cotton textiles that even poor people around the world and in England could buy, that it increased the demand for raw cotton. And that increased demand for raw cotton led to the increase of the number of slaves in the South of the United States. So I hope you see this connection. It's a very powerful one, though it's one that's often not been discussed enough. We tend to think of the Industrial Revolution as involving machines and factories in places such as England or the north of the United States. Machines tended to by low-wage workers who were, yes, exploited because they were paid very little. In some cases, there was child labor. But we tend to forget that the raw cotton that ended up in these factories and was turned into cotton shirts, we tend to forget that that raw cotton was grown by slaves in slave plantations. So that's the main thing I want you to understand this week, is the very close connection between slave plantations in the south of the United States and factories in England and in the north, mostly in the north of the United States. Okay? So the second point here we're going to look at is more local. You know, we're in New York City, so we want to also look at a little bit of local history. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal was, a canal is an artificial river, basically, that's excavated by humans in order to facilitate the transportation of goods along water. And by 1825, the Erie Canal, as its name, is completed, and you see it here. What it does is that it connects the Great Lakes that extend into the Midwest of the United States to the Mohawk River, which is navigable. And the Mohawk River, in turn, connects to the Hudson River, which is also navigable, which makes its way all the way down to New York. So what the Erie Canal does, in effect, is it creates a new, easy means of transportation for products that can now be shipped on boats from New York to the Mohawk River, across the Erie Canal to the Great Lakes, right? And the main takeaway here is that it's the Erie Canal that's finished in 1825. And remember, this is before the construction of railways, of railroads and trains. It's the Erie Canal that will turn New York into what it is now, which is a major port of entry, meaning a place where goods are shipped into and exported out of, and which will make, therefore, New York a very rich commercial city. Okay, and of course that's relevant to the U.S. economy in general, because as New York grows in importance after 1825, it will help grow the overall American economy. Okay, but what's also true is that New York City, in its importance, will grow commercially also in terms of the slave trade. Okay, the status of New York will now, as a great commercial center, will be increasingly associated to the slave economy. So we have this paradox that even though after 1827 slavery was forbidden in New York and there were no longer any slaves in New York, still the raw cotton that was grown in the South was primarily shipped to New York and then shipped out of New York to England, making New York, even though there were no slaves by then, a very important center of the overall cotton economy and of the overall slave economy. Okay, so that's it for today. And I'm going to end now our